Hi, all. It's Jeff Gordon, founder of Writers Bootcamp. We're in our 37th year, and welcome to our new series called Creative Currency. We used to use that phrase to represent a scholarship or somebody's script, which is creative currency. And we're exploring the value of creativity, especially in this age of recovery from a disrupt, from the streamers taking over production, the somewhat downgrade of the studios at a certain level in terms of volume. Then COVID, slow recovery from COVID, the actor strike, the writer strike. And then we eventually in LA had the reduction of production by the streamers, as well as the wildfires last January 2025, just when things started to feel like they were going well. So while we wait for our speaker today, an old friend, Todd Hoffman, CEO of Storied Media Group. I'll just mention a few announcements. Our next basic trainings are July 1st, Wednesday mornings, 10 weeks. Takes you from idea through 3 drafts of a feature or a pilot or the foundation of a book. And here's Todd.
Hey, man. How are
Hey,
you?
thanks for being here. We launched yesterday with Cheryl Lazar. She's an old friend. I don't know if you know her, but she's somebody great for anybody to know. And when it
Congratulations.
comes to the democratization of content creation and your philosophy, you would love her because she's got an initiative called Creators for Mental Health and a bill that she's working on with Ro Khanna, congressman from California, called Digital Workers' Rights, the Bill of Rights for Digital Workers. Anyway, you'd get a kick out of her. So thanks for being here.
She sounds great.
In a way, we're remiss because as long as we've known each other and have liked each other, and then you were even teaching in our building, and we
4
share
years.
the same master's program, Peter Stark at USC. We have never done this.
I
So,
know. I know. I'm
and
looking forward to it.
And this is just a short 30-minute series as opposed to our long form where we could, talk about the business model of your prior productions. And I do want to ask you a few things today, but I'll do just an introductory
We'll
comment
we'll
or
we'll
two.
we'll, we'll do the longer version later. I tend to get much less interesting after 30 minutes, so I think this is an
Like
appropriate format.
anybody,
Yeah.
like anybody. So you were, well, first of all, it's always interesting to know what was your first job in the business?
My first job was I worked for a producer named Craig Baumgarten,
Oh,
um, and I was his director of development. But
he
before, when
was
I
from
got out of
Chicago. I have an interview with him through
he
my
is.
Chicagoans in the industry back in the
He
day.
is a Chicago guy.
Yeah.
And Craig, who I met through the Stark program, before that, I got out of the Stark program and I just started trying to produce because I kind of bought into the propaganda that if you got a master's in producing, you could actually do it. I had no idea what I was doing. And then Craig rescued me and said, come in and learn the rules of the business. So I worked with him for a few years and then went out and produced.
Amazing. 2 literary agencies, a couple of the best, producing. Um, you taught at Stark for a number of years. What did they learn from you?
Still do. I mean, it's been 28 years I've been teaching. Um, I mean, I don't really think of me as a teacher. I'm just like a guide.
Storyteller?
A storyteller of sorts. Um, I started teaching independent producing, and I did that for several years. And I've kind of also morphed into doing career planning. And
Hmm.
last year, Ed Saxon, who's the new director, asked me to teach ethics, entertainment and ethics, which you might think is a
Isn't that an
short, should be a,
oxymoron?
well, that's exactly why the course is needed.
Yeah.
It's more than a 10-minute course. And so I taught entertainment, ethics and entertainment last year, and I'll be doing that again this year.
Have you been integrating AI issues?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely part of what we're talking about. I think you have to
Hmm.
these days because it's a part of our culture.
And we're still getting under the hood of it. And I've met with somebody who has suggested that it can be taken offline so that everything isn't exactly public, and we have at Writers Boot Camp 150 proprietary tools and techniques. And I still feel that our educational philosophy should emphasize that writers are still writing and doing that work. And maybe there's helpfulness in terms of the drudgery. But, there is physicality to writing, and that can be challenging. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I read an article a couple of weeks ago that said that 1/3 of songwriters now are using AI to help prompt ideas and ideation and so I think that's a really slippery slope. You
it
know,
feels anathema because the uniqueness of a creator's voice, it tends to feel to me to be either from the inherent irony that they understand about cliches or use of cliche in a distinctive way. And so um the jury's out.
yeah. Well, I also don't think that AI is particularly creative yet, and I think because it's amassed just this trove of information, then it tends to spit out kind of the medium, not necessarily mediocrity, but the medium, which doesn't really get me that excited about. I don't want to hear the music from songwriters that are you know going after the going after average. I want to hear
Right.
extraordinary.
When we'll talk about your business model and storied media, but what tools are you using technologically? And then I want to set the stage to talk about your view of the world of representation and if you think it's changed significantly, because I feel with all the disruption and the need to pivot that it's been harder for new artists unless they're highly entrepreneurial and visionary in that way, that to broadly see their path of success based on the traditional avenues being somewhat limited or bottlenecked, or at least for a period of time. Because even after the mortgage crisis, when private equity dried up, we saw a resurgence in feature films and independent films, because from 2011 to 2017, it turned out, you look back after that, fallow period, and nearly 80 movies were produced that were written by Writers Boot Camp alumni, and they probably stayed on for nearly every rewrite.
Wow,
But
that's amazing.
still, that was an indicative of the fact that equity stormed back. So what tools, just in general, what tools are you integrating, including on your staff? Well, why don't you give us a
Yeah,
sentence or two about Storied Media? Because I don't understand how you, as a rep, as an agent, signed the New York Times, signed 60 Minutes, and what that was supposed to be designed for. Was that like
yeah,
signing a producer as
right,
a
right.
media
Well,
company?
um, well, just historically, I mean, so the reason why I signed the New York Times, it was complete luck and happenstance and a bright idea I think I had in 2006. I was working at Broder, Webb, Chervin, Silverman as a lit agent, and knew I had a client who I knew wanted to write something about the Iraq War. And there was a great article in the magazine that I read, and I thought, wow, this could be interesting. I sent it to him. He liked it. And so I reached out to the journalist, a guy, turns out a guy who had become very famous, Dexter Filkins, who wrote The Forever War. And he was like, yeah, go ahead and sell it. So I thought, okay, great. So I started working on it, and Steven, the writer, came up with a pitch. And right before we were about to have this meeting with Tom Cruise's company, he said, actually, I'm not entirely sure I own this. call this guy at the New York Times. And I was freaking out. So I called the guy at the New York Times and he said, yeah, go ahead, try and sell it. And that'd be great. And we attached Tom Cruise and we sold it for a lot of money to Paramount. And it was after that that I went back to the New York Times and said, you guys need an agent. You need somebody, your reputation in Hollywood is that you can't close a deal. Nobody knows who owns what and what's being sent where. And you need a traffic cop. You need somebody who can help guide you in Hollywood. And I should be the guy. And they said, okay. I mean, it took a little longer. It took a trip.
Right.
Chris Silberman and I went to New York and sat with them. And it was the first time that they had taken a literary agent. And that really started my excitement into this world of representing companies and publishers, which led to signing The Atlantic, which led to signing the McClatchy newspaper group, 60 Minutes. And, and then I started producing inside the agency. And then we were sold to ICM and then continued and built the list. Washington Post,
And you
NPR.
had a necessary a relevant position, a necessary role, because you had, in effect, created a department.
Well, I ended up running the media rights group at ICM, but I was a relatively small part in a much bigger, more established, prestigious department. Their New York book office was, the gold standard in representation. So my job was to represent my companies, but also, when they would send me books, they'd say, all right, go sell this. And so that was my job. And I started Storied Media Group in 2013, really so I could work with everyone and not just clients of ICM. And that was really the impetus to do it. I really felt like there was a better model out there. And the clients, I was blessed, the New York Times left with me to start this company. We got a lot made from, TV shows, Fox, Netflix shows to The Mule with Clint Eastwood and everything.
Right.
And then that led to Story Scout.
Which is a platform.
Yeah. And so what we were doing was curating IP daily with our readers, looking for projects that we thought could sell in scripted and unscripted. And then we would tag them with different, categories, location, geography, genre, character, and such. And so we could find them. And it was after a little while that I realized, wait a minute, we're actually sitting on something that could be a product. And that was the origination of the idea behind Story Scout, which was let's create a digital marketplace and a consultancy so that we can actually work with producers and studios and management companies and help match great IP to the people that want it. And that was the origination.
So a media company with an archive, do they automatically become a part of Story Scout as a client of SMG?
So we sign as SMG. And then we use Story Scout as an additional marketing tool. So we still, as representatives, our job is to sell their IP and to work with them on a corporate level and do whatever's necessary, call whomever outside of, most often outside of the so-called Story Scout network. That being said, if something doesn't sell, so we'll put together a bespoke marketing plan for a piece of IP. If it sells, great. If it doesn't, we can also put it into Story Scout and it can exist there so that people can find it. And it might not sell in month 1, but it might sell in month 12.
And is Story Scout a subscription service?
It's a subscription
membership
service.
Okay.
Yeah, it's closed subscription service.
And producers are invited, or they can ask,
they're invited with request a credit card.
Okay.
No. So we work
and that's storyscout.com.
Storyscout.com. Yeah. And we work with studios, management companies, producers here and in Europe. And, like we work with Anonymous Content, for example. We work with all their managers and they have us sit with their writers. You know, IP is so important, even more so than it was in 2013. It's so important these days to have something that's originated somewhere else
What do
to
you
help drive
think?
sales.
Yeah, why do you think true stories are so significantly popular, or why is it that executives and companies, even with original material, often will backstop a project with something that wasn't the original source but gives maybe
Yeah.
credibility to
Yeah,
material?
it's a strange quirk of the business. I think Hollywood has always had a fascination with true stories, because you can shine the light back on the actual person as an added marketing angle. We did our own little analysis of Academy Award nominations and wins, and what we found was that in the last 30 years, you're three times more likely to get nominated for an Academy Award if you play a real person.
That's
And,
fantastic. A great
isn't that,
stat.
it's wild. It's wild. And so, you would think it would be the other way around. Like, yeah, you should create an
Right,
original
technical.
character.
Yeah, the technique.
Yeah, but that's kind of so actors. So it's bait for actors. And in terms of the quirk of IP, I think I realized that the idea was going to work. The first year I was out, I got three different calls during TV season. Back when the networks actually had a season, from executives at studios, and they said, "Hey, we just heard an original pitch that we really want to buy. Do you have a piece of IP that we can marry it to?" And
Right,
backwards engineer. And I said, just buy the damn pitch. You don't need my IP. And they're like, no, it's just easier to sell upstairs. And so,
right.
yeah, I think it's important, whether it's a best-selling book or a true story or manga or graphic novel or podcast. If I think higher ups are looking for any proof that there is an audience or a community, that
Right.
if it's made in another format, people will go see it. So even an article that went viral, it shows that people were fascinated with with the story. And so
Possibly, possibly it carves a demographic
absolutely, absolutely.
in advance.
Yeah.
So,
And you
yeah,
mentioned
go
about AI. As we've evolved the website, the only thing that we're doing for AI is we are we it's you can search for content through the tags, but now you can also just use natural language in terms of search. So you can say, "Show me quirky stories about uh, mother and son criminals in Venezuela."
great.
And if we have it,
Right.
we'll
Something will
find
come
it.
up in the database.
And then we also,
Is that through the whisper process now instead of typing?
no, not yet. We're not whispering yet. And then we also have a proactive pipe that we've connected to all our, we have about 1,100 sites that we can curate from. So we can now type in what we're looking for and see what's there that day. So we could just say crime and get, hundreds and hundreds of stories. But at the end of the day, I think it still requires that human interaction with the material, because that's what people are paying us for. That's the curation.
Which is development acumen, taste, and judgment. And
That's
obviously,
exactly
having
right.
worked so well and produced and been a representative, you understand that intuitively.
Well, AI doesn't have taste. You're right.
Yet, yeah,
And thank God, because
right.
we're still relatively
I just
necessary.
want to be nice to the robots so that they remember that later.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Exactly.
I was in the William Morris training program before Stark, and I remember Jerry Katzman, the head of television packaging before he became the president of the agency, was my boss briefly, and he later wrote a letter of recommendation and said, "You don't need this, Jeff. You know more than they do." I said, "Well, I didn't grow up in Hollywood, and I know I'm going to be living in LA for the rest of my life potentially. So why not go to grad school?" And then it bought me time to figure things out. And then in my last semester, because there was a writer strike then, we didn't find the development jobs. I'd already been an assistant, and I started Writers Boot Camp, and that's 37 years ago.
That's
Uh,
how it happened. Wow.
And I wanted to teach at SC, and they didn't have room for a Starkey, which back then there wasn't the respect. But can you discuss for new writers and artists, and when you look at the monster successes recently, that maybe I've seen some conspiratorial comments as if studios are co-opting a kind of success through obsession and back rooms. Of course, those are genre pictures, and certain requirements story-wise are not always as necessary with certain genres, like character arcs, especially if something happens over a shorter time span, and those kinds of tropes and approaches to storytelling. But what do you really think about the representation angle right now? Is it simply you have a following, you prove your following, and you'll find, you know, bigger fish who want to get involved in support? Are your peers and our peers from years ago still in the business? Because you made an incredible segue, and I'm not sure your evolution of your company is a pivot. It's more, in a positive sense, opportunistic, and you're simply building out your model.
Yeah, it really it wasn't a pivot. It was kind of a direct next step. I thought,
Right.
um, not that we haven't shapeshifted through the years as the industry changes, but I think the nature of representation is complete has not completely changed. It has pivoted because it needs to because the business has changed and it needs to continue to find great talent. So I think there's actually never been a better time to be creative and a
Right.
talent creator, whether you're writer or director or actor, because there aren't the barriers to entry that there were when we were coming up. You'd have to struggle sometimes years just to get noticed by a manager or an agent. Well, now and you couldn't really go out and shoot a movie because it costs a lot of money. Well, everyone has a movie camera now, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so um, you can make your own luck. You can go out and you can, and when I teach career planning at Stark, I threw away my notes that I used to use 5 years ago because I said,
Right.
this doesn't apply anymore. There are no more rules. There's no ladder. Um, for every one person who does kind of the traditional march up the chain in to be a producer, there are five that did it their own way. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that the success of those two movies was really a 1-2 punch, not a sucker punch, but it was like the 1-2 punch that the industry needed. But agencies have been ahead of that curve for a while. I mean, they have creator divisions now. They have people combing the
Mm-hmm.
internet, combing TikTok and Insta, and even Snap, just looking for anything that's interesting and growing those. Um, and the reason why I think horror and thriller has popped off of that is that it's it's due to just the attention span of
Mm-hmm.
that generation.
The
It's
visceral
it's
nature of the
yeah, it's bait.
project.
Yeah, you don't want to stick around for a long drama about something. It could be amazing, but people would rather see something that's going to really catch them viscerally within a few minutes, and then go. But coming up, I remember when Robert Rodriguez made El Mariachi for seven thousand
Mm-hmm.
dollars. So I mean, there's stories that have happened for years and years about people just um, taking their own power and agency and going for it. And so I think creators really need to be proactive now more than ever.
What are a couple of steps that you're suggesting for writers, filmmakers, actors to differentiate themselves in terms of format right now?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, format is, I'm not sure I actually have the right answer because I think that people, I always tell creators to listen to their inner voice, because that's the thing that's going to differentiate them. Write, don't write, don't write what you think people want. Write what you know, and write your soul in the beginning, so people can see your talent, and that extends to acting and directing. If it's format, like if you're funny, start putting out,
Right.
2-minute little clips or 30-second clips, and get an audience and have 4 million followers, and then expand out. And eventually, um, you're going to have your own audience, and an agent will find you. And by the way, it's not like your life's going to change once you get an agent, the agents will and managers will find you when they're ready, not when you're ready for them. It's when they're
Right.
ready.
If they're not calling, they don't want to date you.
Exactly. And so you can chase representation and throw out all those cover letters, and as a screenwriter you should, and get people to read you, but take matters into your own hand and just go and send it out to producers, and find a producer who loves your work. They're likely to call their agent friend and say, by the way, I got something you should probably look at.
Right. Right. And not necessarily the particular agent, but is there somebody at your agency, or it's always a feather in anybody's cap in the business to champion somebody and to have that sense of discovery. Now,
Yeah,
life isn't necessarily well structured. And
mine
while
is.
worse, is it? No, but you elevate routine to ritual status, right? But in terms of story material, somebody's autobiography, because something happened doesn't mean to you doesn't mean it doesn't fall into the derivative category. And so, of course, we have to find something that's familiar but in a fresh way. And there are 15
Yeah,
parts of an idea as we define them at Writers Boot Camp. And even week 2 of our basic training, we go through that. And after a first draft, we don't expect all of those to be solved, resolved, fully aligned. But at least our writers are aware that that's too early to submit their material. So, and this isn't formulaic. It's about the profession and a professional. And again, certain projects have an inherent mitigation, because if there's a visceral moment and that's recurring and the setup is there and it takes place overnight, there's less expectation for a summer experience to create change for a character. But in your development approach, what are some of the key questions that are differentiating? And because you have development experience, even as a representative, you're a producer,
yeah,
so you understand, yet a writer cannot have an outsider's view of the craft.
yeah. Um, I mean, as a representative of writers, I, I would really just look for craft and voice, because you're not signing that script. You're signing a person who you hope you'll be able to grow, and work with for years and years and years, and make them a lot of money. You get
Hmm.
a small piece of it.
Right.
So you're signing voice. Um, and and you take those bets, and you take many, and in some work and most don't. But our business, and then in terms of what I look for, given that we're in the business of IP, um, we and we represent books and comic books and such, as well. But in the real life space, what we look for is, we joke that we live in the world of you can't make this shit up. It's those stories that, like, if a writer had gone into a room and pitched it, as fiction, they'd be laughed out of the room, because people would say, well, that would never happen, right? That's ridiculous. So, a story about a 90-year-old drug mule. Okay, well, please, right? Like, that would never happen. But it did, and Clint Eastwood starred and directed in the movie. Or, we wrote, there's a a story about a small town lawyer from Alabama whose true passion is being a beauty pageant consultant. And moms bring their daughters to him, and he teaches them how to become beauty queens. And when it was written, the past 4 out of 5 Miss Americas were his clients. And like, what is that, right? Well, that ended up selling to CBS Productions, and it ended up on the air for 2 years on Netflix as a show called Insatiable. And it
Mm,
took a writer to go, I know how to tell that story. And she created a fiction
right.
from that. And so we look for, or like Tagged, an old movie from New Line about a bunch of
Hmm.
guys in their 50s who've been playing tag since they were kids on the blacktop. And now every February they get together
I think I
around the
saw a
world.
clip of it because wasn't John Hamm in it?
John Hamm was in it. Yeah, it was Jeremy Renner, John Hamm,
Yeah,
Ed Helms. It was great,
yeah.
great cast, and
That's
a
the
hit.
scene I saw with Ed Helms coming to his office and tagging him.
Yeah, it was a really funny movie, and it was very clever and weird. And in the movie, in the trailer, they have a whole, like, 2 seconds of the trailer is based on a true story. And I think that helps when people go, this is
Right.
incredible. Like, we're going to make a movie in the first quarter that's based on a true story about 5 hitmen. True story in China where this businessman took a hit out on his rival, and the hitman had second thoughts and subcontracted it out to a second hitman who himself couldn't do it and contracted it out to a third hitman, and that happened 5 times. And then the last guy went to the guy he was supposed to kill, and by the way, every time the amount of money they were getting paid kept going down because the hitman would take a little off the
Right,
top.
right. The
And
percentages.
the last guy went to the guy who was supposed to kill and said, I can't do this. Get on the ground. I'm going to throw fake blood on you, take photos, send it, and hopefully that'll do it. Just whatever you do, don't go to the police. And the guy said, okay. I mean, sounds like a good deal. So he did it, took the photos, and the guy went to the police, and they were all arrested.
Oh
Like,
my
you
God.
can't make this story up.
Right.
And we're making the movie, and with Anna Perna in January. So those are the things that we look for, the jaw droppers.
Well, you have an incredible track record, and you do have that taste and judgment. Any other insights to close this session of Creative Currency on, what's upcoming, what writers and artists ideally are focused on? Yes, voice. Yes, choosing a genre based on that voice. And I feel continuing to work in that realm so that people know you for that kind of expertise, not pushing things out there before they're ready, but also managing that, letting people come to you because they become fans of your work because this is what you do. But any other insight? Right, Todd, thanks so much for today. We'll have to do a longer version to really talk about producing, more of the details of development, your experience with specific, maybe not naming names, but case studies of representation and what worked, what didn't work. And as we see, hopefully I mean, are the studios just going to become real estate developers ultimately with the consolidation? But we appreciate you so much. I hope to see you soon. Thanks for doing this, and we'll talk soon.